Well, hello everyone. Are you ready to sail the seas in a journey where we laugh and cry, love and hate, kiss and hug? Although some of you probably would rather not. Unfortunately, when it comes to Luffy, hugging isn't really a choice. He's just so full of love. Can you blame the guy? Let's actually get to the point here because I don't really know how to start this video considering I'm kind of vibrating from excitement to get into it. Sorry, we're jumping to my face immediately. Get ready for a Mel jump scare. Hello, it's me. I apologize for throwing you guys straight into the oil for this one. I usually enjoy creating my fun intros too, but we have a huge topic ahead of us today. That topic being the narrative and thematic evaluation of the East Blue. I've done many essays on the characters of One Piece, and I think it's time I finally tackle arcs, but much more thoroughly than I have done before. What I'm saying is this is going to be a whole new series on this channel, a series in which I analyze the arcs in linear order, understanding how these arcs connect and how important themes and characters have been established and evolved throughout the One Piece series. This series is basically don't skip any One Piece arc, so I will break into your house and get you. I've already done videos on Skypiea and Whole Cake Island, but with my extensive rereading of each arc per video, I will be touching on those arcs again too, because I want to cover everything. It's a tall order and others have already done this, but I want to add my 2 cents too. I love making you guys appreciate One Piece more than you already do, so hopefully this video and these upcoming videos will make you appreciate the arcs more as well. And yes, I mean all the arcs, even Skypiea, even Long Ring Longland, even Thriller Bark, because they will be touched on, they will be polished, and they will be appreciated. But for now, let's go back to the East, because it only makes sense to begin from the start. I am a firm believer that to make sense of a story, you have to go from the beginning. If you work your way backwards from a story and it doesn't make sense the further back you go, I think you've kind of not succeeded in your narrative. That might just be me, but an ending can only be an ending if it wraps up the beginning in both an understandable and satisfying way, whether unconventionally or not. Not only that, but beginnings are really hard. You're not only setting up your whole story, but you have to be engaging and you have to give promise of what's to come, all while being in your earliest stage of writing. As a writer, that's very difficult. It's why the start can make or break a story just as much as an ending can. But I think Oda has done a fantastic job with his beginnings, and I can't wait to show you why. This video is about the East, or as I like to call it, the Pokemon Kanto equivalent of the One Piece world, because if anything keeps getting remade again and again and again, it's this damn arc. And yet, throughout all these remakes, they hardly change anything from the original manga, and that's probably because there's not too much to polish. The way this video will work is I've compiled all the mini arcs within the East Blue saga, or the East Blue arc. It may not be the official way of doing things, but it's the easier way of doing things, because I'm not making 4 to 5 separate videos per mini arc within this series. This video will be going into Romance Dawn, Syrup Village, Baratie, Arlong Park, and Logue Town. Things like Orange Town will be included in the Romance Dawn section because that whole area just kind of mixes together. I will also be going only through the manga. I will not be including anime editions, book editions, or any outside sources. We're going through the story from the story. So this is a tunnel vision viewing of sticking strictly to the manga to see if it holds together on its own. In terms of the themes, this is about the establishment of them. What did the East Blue do? What did it set up? What did it introduce? What did it promise? And how did Oda write the heart of it? So sit down, bring a loved one with you, and we'll explore the depths of the East Blue together. But before that, It's sponsor time. The East Blue may be the tamest sea, but there's still threats and dangers to be found. And you can sail these seas peacefully, all while fighting off master swordsmen with NordVPN. I use NordVPN every day, and I love it with all my heart because it makes sure my internet searches, browsing, and history is completely protected. That means no bugs trying to crawl into my damn computer. NordVPN also hides my IP address and keeps me safe from spying. And that means it can do all of that for you too. So you can safely Google something like, say it with me baby, Zoro's big fat boobies. NordVPN also protects you from pop-up ads and malicious malware. So if Zoro's big jugs were hiding any viruses in them, NordVPN will bat them away for good. It also allows you to be thrown anywhere in the world, meaning if you want to see Japanese ads on YouTube, because they're being very mean about adblock these days, NordVPN can do that for you. Just set it to Japan and you're off. It can also give you access to any country's version of Netflix or multiple streaming services. I personally use it to watch different anime that are available in different countries, especially One Piece movies because it's a damn pain to find these things for some reason. And with my link below, you will get the best NordVPN deal yet. You can get 4 months extra on a 2-year plan, and it's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. NordVPN can be your protector, your savior, your lover, while browsing the online world. A VPN is so worth it, and NordVPN especially gives you a great deal and a great online experience. Be sure to use my link below, in both the description and the pinned comments, and you'll get a fast, safe, and cheap VPN. So grab that deal now, and thank you so much NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get into it. We're plundering into the somewhat tame yet still terrifying waters of the East, starting with Romance Dawn.
この帽子をお前に預ける。俺の大切な帽子だ。
Who and what is introduced in this arc? Well, it's the start. So it's Roger, Luffy, Shanks, Kobe, Zoro, Nami, Buggy, and Gaimon? We also have an introduction of pirates, devil fruits, mountain bandits, the marines, the Grand Line, and the blooming of dreams. Now, what's important in this arc? Let's count them. Roger, Luffy, Buggy, 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 and I nearly forgot Buggy. I'm just kidding, of course, I just really like Buggy. In all honesty, it's hard to pick and choose the importance of everything because everything we are seeing from the start here are things to pay a lot of attention to. Admittedly, One Piece does feel it has a semi-slow start, but that's mainly because of Luffy being directionally aimless when looking for his crew. This is the first and honestly only arc where Luffy is actively seeking out crewmates and not expecting them to just fall into his lap. I know he seeked out a doctor, a musician, and a shipwright after this, but he wasn't going from A to B to pluck people onto his ship. But this selection process of Luffy's is vital in showing us not only his character, but the characters of the East Blue Straw Hats too, and the moral core and fiber of the Straw Hats as a whole, which is something we'll be getting into later. For now, let's have a refresher. Don't worry, I will not recount every single scene to you guys. I just make these videos with the assumption either not everyone has read One Piece, or some of you haven't reread it in a very long time. The very first pages open with the one and only Gold Roger, only known as Gold Roger at this point in time, followed by some of the most iconic lines in the series. Gold Roger, the king of the pirates, had it all: wealth, fame, and power had all been his. Already we're seeing the values of this world, as Roger quite literally sets the stage for all of One Piece. Roger's opening molds into Luffy's own introduction, as we're seeing the death of an old king and the age of a new one. But not only that, we're seeing how pirates, wills, and dreams are formed in this world through Luffy's relationship with Shanks. Luffy didn't barrel out of the gate screaming he'll be king of the pirates. Originally, he just wanted to join Shanks's crew. Yet, as Shanks and his crew teach him lessons, morals, and the ways of piracy, Luffy eventually splits from under Shanks's wing with the promise of becoming not just his own pirate, but the Pirate King. And of course, this is set in stone and encouraged as a promise as Shanks passes down that iconic straw hat. That's a MacGuffin if I ever saw one. Personally, I think it'd be funnier if Shanks gave Luffy his severed arm and said, "Keep this one safe for me, buddy." But let's backpedal a little and actually look at what Shanks and his crew were telling Luffy. The red-haired pirates told us what their version of piracy means, what this lifestyle means, and what they believe it should be. Overall, the crew tells Luffy being a pirate means having a good time, exploring islands, and having freedom. Ben specifically tells Luffy it's not just fun and games, but piracy is also about pillaging, hostage-taking, heavy drinking, and swimming. That last bit is Ben mostly teasing Luffy, but interestingly enough, the Straw Hats have indeed done all of these things in the future. They pillaged both Sabaody and Whole Cake Island. They took Caesar Clown hostage. They drink heavily when they can, and some of them do indeed swim. So while Luffy has fun as a pirate, he obviously took these duties to heart. An interesting note here is, to begin with, Luffy was originally a bad swimmer. Even without the devil fruit, he was called an anchor. And this seems purposeful in Luffy's dreams and will persevering against the odds, even as a child. After all, he can't exactly blame the devil fruit for taking any abilities away if he didn't have those abilities to begin with. And he was still planning to make the best of his situation even while lacking the capacity to swim in an ocean-filled lifestyle. The other thing I need to mention is Oda was still figuring out how to write with subtlety. He's very much evolved as a writer, and you can certainly tell when reading these first chapters. You have lines like Shanks saying, "Oh boy, I just love making fun of this kid," and Morgan saying, "Wow, I am so great," even though these things are glaringly obvious. This is like if Kaido said, "Oh man, I'm just so Thank you, Oda, for realizing you don't need to spoon feed us all the time. Sometimes we need it, but he's better at picking and choosing when we need it. Oh, I said I was going to give a refresher, but I'm kind of stuck in the Shanks bit. But that's because this whole first chapter is a really phenomenal setup of Luffy's dreams, a pirate's life, and the age of pirates at large. Luffy's character is especially given a lot of love and understanding, as we find he's happy to have eaten the gum fruit, while Whoop Slap says to him, "You think being gawked at because you're a freak is a good thing?" Whoop Slap! What the f***? You are like 80 years old and you're telling this little boy he should be ashamed of being a freak. I guess if anything's representative of angry boomers, it's this miserable asshole. His name is Whoop Slap because I am about to whoop and slap his ass. And yet, this line is important too, because we're getting an insight of the outcasts in this world. Even in a world of devil fruits in the age of pirates, devil fruit users are still seen as freaks. This is a very small tidbit we've gotten, and yet it's an indication of the existing outcasts of this fictional society. Luffy's a freak. The common person says freaks are bad, but Luffy chooses to live outside of those norms as he is. And obviously from there, he chooses to recruit a bunch of fellow freaks. It's no wonder he wasn't scared of Zoro's rumors being a demon when Luffy probably got a bunch of nasty rumors about himself growing up. And the age of pirates only gets more developed as Luffy grows up and interacts with the outside world. Shanks was a very tiny portion of what piracy was seen to be, so meeting Alvida and Buggy seems to be Oda telling us that pirates are what they make themselves to be, whether they be the joyful over-drinking Shanks type or the aggressive, vengeful Alvida and Buggy types. But, as always, leave my girlfriend out of this. God forbid he go through a phase. It's made more interesting with the reveal that Shanks and Buggy came from the same ship. Discovering this straw hat Luffy was given may hold more significance than initially thought. But I digress. We have to go back a bit before talking about the clan. My favorite part of Luffy's literal first day of piracy, and my favorite thing Oda did, is show us that Luffy really does just get into situations. The first thing that happens is Luffy gets sucked into a whirlpool, and all he thinks is, oh well, if I die, I die. At first, this might seem ridiculous, but this world being randomly perilous had to be addressed first and foremost. We already got this info with the mountain bandits and the sea monster during Luffy's childhood, but we keep seeing it again and again and again, from Luffy's whirlpool fiasco, to Kobe's situation, to Zoro's capture, to Orange Town's destruction, and even to Gaimon's whole thing. Luffy is a naturally happy guy, but that big fat smile aside, this world is very dangerous. There's many unfortunate people and unfortunate situations happening in One Piece, and establishing this as soon as possible shows us just how fearless Luffy really is to set out with this big fat grin. Luffy's fearlessness is what inspired Kobe to stand up to Alvida and chase his own dreams, Kobe being the first person Luffy ever inspired, and Luffy didn't even have a single crewmate yet. I think it's a fantastic idea of Oda to show Luffy's influence with a marine wannabe first, rather than someone like Zoro. That way we can see straight away Luffy's influences reaches beyond his crewmates and even beyond pirates. So once recruiting Zoro after meeting Kobe, Zoro being a so-called pirate hunter, Luffy's effect doesn't seem so far-fetched. Speaking of Zoro, if we get back to the writing, it's pretty clear Oda was still figuring Zoro out at this point in time. I've laughed about this in a previous video, but Zoro did not sound like Zoro here at all. He's quite literally begging Kobe to untie him while bargaining with him. For a man who takes promises and his words seriously, this feels very out of character now. You could say this was just Zoro's starvation talking, but considering they left these lines out of the anime, it's very possible Oda hit himself in the head for that. Cut the man some slack. We're not all masterful writers and character building entrepreneurs at the age of 22? Jesus Christ, what have I been doing with my life? Zoro's introduction is very important, not just because he's the first crewmate to be recruited, but because he demonstrates a very important theme in the world of One Piece. The theme being misinformation. If you haven't noticed, One Piece is very, very adamant on the effects of misinformation, on the danger of rumors, and on the wickedness of purposefully hiding history. Zoro doesn't encompass all of these things, but he plants the seed for this topic that is constant throughout One Piece. Our first introduction of Zoro is Alvida telling us he's an intelligent pirate hunter who's clever enough to break out of prison on his own. Already that's it's a little bit laughable. Kobe tells Luffy that Zoro is a terrifying man and a demon who hunts down pirates in cold blood. And the town holding Zoro hostage is terrified at even hearing Zoro's name. Then we meet Zoro. We get to know Zoro, and not only does he try to save a little girl from the Marines, but he eats her rice ball off the ground and tells Luffy to thank her for the food. The little girl vouches for Zoro, telling us he's not a bad man, and Kobe can't can't seem to fathom the truth of the situation. Following on from this, we find out Zoro isn't even a pirate hunter. At least, he doesn't believe himself to be one. He never called himself that, so he doesn't consider himself that. And his cold-blooded killing and hunting of pirates of the East turns out to be that he got lost and he needed money to be able to eat. Being directionless and hungry while taking advantage of the Marine's bounty system turns you into a demon, apparently. This is clearly information we must keep in the back of our heads with how this world and its powers will twist someone's story and life to be what they want it to be. This pirate hunter misconception is so established that Zoro is still called it to this day, even while being a pirate. The Marines and newspapers just really can't let it go. The Marines being extreme is also shown around this time, and there's something to be said about the Marines capturing and fighting with someone who's apparently a pirate hunter. You'd think that because Zoro is only hunting pirates, they'd have no problems with him. But I guess anyone who kills pirates outside of the Marine system is not seen as a hero, but as a demon. Once again, it seems to be part of the world building here. It's seamless in its addition, then made a bit more obvious as Morgan tells his squad to not only kill a little girl, but to shoot themselves in the head for disobeying him. It's a little bit much, but Oda is really trying to get across the moral goods of this world are not really the moral goods at all, and indicating to us there's a deep-rooted problem with the Marines from the get-go. Honestly, Zoro's recruitment was a fantastic showing of one of the major powers of this world, the Marines, and it's then immediately followed with the introduction of Buggy, demonstrating that pirates are just as destructive and power-hungry. So basically, this world would be a shithole were we not following Luffy's journey, I guess. Speaking of Buggy, let's touch on Orange Town. Orange Town establishes two major and amazing characters, Nami and Buggy. 3 if we count Choo Choo. This mini-arc opens with Nami tricking Buggy's crew, conveying her intelligence of weather, her flawless trickery, and her thieving nature. That's 1, 2, 3 things we learn about Nami from the get-go, and as simple as this introduction is, I would also call this flawless. It was fun, it was smart, and it even incorporated Buggy's crew to connect her smoothly to Luffy, all combined with the fact Nami doesn't fight physically to get what she wants, at least not traditionally, not with fists, not with weapons, but by manipulating the weather to her advantage. Gosh, I wonder what that will turn into. Climate Act. Nami also voices her hatred of pirates, not exactly joining Luffy's crew, but forming an alliance with him. I know you all know this information already, but this is called a setup. For what payoff exactly? We'll get to that much later. After Nami, we meet the man of the hour and my girlfriend, Buggy the Clown. Buggy is the first character we meet outside of Luffy who has a devil fruit, so now we know Luffy's Gum Gum power is specific, and also that these devil fruits can be found around the world. Now, from Luffy to Zoro to Buggy to Choo Choo, another theme is being established here, and that theme is the theme of treasure. Pirates love treasure, as Buggy says, but Oda puts a twist on it within his story. Treasures in One Piece don't tend to be jewels and gold, but instead, they're personal items of significant importance. Wado is Zoro's treasure, although I can't remember if he ever said it, but it's important enough that Luffy getting it back meant joining his crew. The Straw Hat is Luffy's treasure, something he even yells at Buggy's crew while Nami watches across from them. At this point in time, they didn't know each other at all. Nami even questions why such a thing is his treasure and assumes there must be jewels or a map hidden within it. Buggy's own backstory is literally about hating Shanks because Shanks took his treasure from him. At the time of these chapters, we were told the treasure that Shanks took was Buggy's ability to swim. Therefore, he took the ability for Buggy to find treasure in the seas. But remember, misinformation has become a set thing within this series, so with hindsight, we can probably guess the treasure in question wasn't a literal treasure at all. But if not physical, what was the treasure Shanks stole from Buggy? His dreams. For those who know, I know you know what I'm talking about. Nami's treasure has not been brought up yet, but her own fondness for money falls into the treasure category right now. And that brings me to Choo Choo. This is why this dog exists. Choo Choo's treasure was the pet store his deceased owner built. And that's why Nami and Luffy become fond of this little dog once being told of Choo Choo's determination to protect his own personal treasure. Choo Choo is a very bittersweet carrier of the majority of themes within this series. Choo Choo's passing of will as he holds onto his owner's dreams, Choo Choo's protection of his treasure that keeps his ambition burning, and Choo Choo's connection to his owner still shining bright even though his owner has passed on. Choo Choo is essentially the Straw Hats in dog form. All of them. Oda is holding this dog up and going, this is what One Piece is about. This is what, it's not the dog, it's not about the dog, but it's what the dog represents. This is art. But hey, it worked. I know multiple people who cried over Choo Choo, so maybe the One Piece was all the dogs that we pet along the way. One more note to take from Orange Town is Luffy telling Nami what being a pirate means. He tells her she was unprepared the second she took pirates lightly, and that being prepared means risking your own life. I.e., this pirate shit is serious and pirates understand having a captain and being in a crew means giving your life. Of course, who you follow matters, shown by Buggy using his crew as shields at the time. He was a little dastardly, but at least he was fun. And the final note of this mini arc is Luffy not allowing anyone to interrupt Zoro's duel with Kabaji. While some pirates play dirty in this regard, Luffy does not. And he respects Zoro's honor as a swordsman and a pirate. Finally, to end Romance Dawn, we get to Gaimon, who is an interesting little fellow. Gaimon is essentially just here to tell us about the Grand Line, tell us how dangerous it is, but he also establishes the theme of hope? This little thing got stuck in a box due to an unfortunate accident, yet he stayed on the island and stayed alive with the hope of treasure on top of a big rock. Gaimon's hope kept him going, a hope Luffy didn't want to diminish, but he figured it out anyway. However, in the same way Buggy's treasure probably wasn't a physical thing, Gaimon's own treasure turned into something else. He became fond of the animals of the island, as they were all exotic in nature and would often be hunted, so he wanted to protect them. In a cute way, Gaimon's treasure became the animals of the island, his soul not crushed due to finding something more important than gold and jewels. So yes, while Gaimon was important in establishing the Grand Line, he was also there to continue these themes of personal treasure, how it evolves, and to introduce the theme of hope? Gaimon did that. I love this stupid series. Side note, Zoro stayed asleep this whole arc. He literally didn't even meet Gaimon. Have we ever seen Zoro and Gaimon in the same room before? Suspicious. But that's about all the important points of Romance Dawn, or all that was established in Romance Dawn. Oda's writing was a little bit blocky here and there. He was especially really heavy on the narration boxes at this point in time, but we can already see him improving through these few chapters. Either way, Romance Dawn was perfect in setting up the harsh world of pirates, the iron grip of the Marines, and Luffy's brilliance as a character. So, with that done, let's move on to Syrup Village.
何言ってんだ。早く乗れよ。
俺たちもう仲間だろ。
The main introductions of this arc are Usopp, Kaya, Kuro, and Mary. Also Usopp's father, Yesop, and essentially Usopp's village as a whole. Buggy's cover story also starts this arc, but I won't be touching that in the same way I didn't touch Kobe's cover story in the past arc because they're just not relevant yet. Okay? I know you Garp fans are joiking your jorts, but leave me alone, I don't want to talk about him yet. Syrup Village opens with Nami saying they need a better boat, as Luffy, Zoro, and Nami are all stuck in these little dinghies. Nami explains that the waters are too harsh for any normal boat to sail on, especially the waters of the Grand Line, and Usopp is even introduced by looking out at the ocean. There's a slow and steady establishment of the oceans within One Piece being its own entity here. Considering a pirate's life is on the waters, it only makes sense that the water be considered its own force as well, possibly even its own character. I'd say this is in a similar sense that you'd consider the hotel in Kubrick's The Shining to be its own character too. Not as unsettling, of course, but something powerful and omnipotent in what it can do to you. The ocean's presence is constant, and it's a keynote to keep in your back pocket. Nami has brought it up because she's the only one out of these three who seems to actually think about the dangers of the ocean. Now, Usopp is an important character because not only is he a Straw Hat, but he is another character outside of Luffy who's dreamed of being a pirate. And not only has he dreamed of it, but his father is a pirate too. Yesop, coincidentally, is part of Shanks's crew, and Luffy finds connection to Usopp through this. Luffy and Usopp's connection, although seemingly unbelievable, is the beginning of Oda's "nothing in this world is a coincidence and nothing can be too far-fetched" when it comes to the connection we find in ourselves and others. The ocean is connecting these characters in many ways, as pirates and friends, and Usopp was the beginning of this theme. While the world is big, sailing these oceans creates bridges of relationships and love, hence why a pirate's life entails such freedom. Usopp only being proud of his dad also tells us that we should not feel bad for him, and Usopp doesn't see Yesop's leaving as abandonment. Usopp is proud Yesop is chasing his dreams, a dream that Usopp also wants to chase someday, and Usopp was a connection of love between Yesop, his mother, and his village. I know we joke about Yesop up and leaving Usopp a lot in this fandom, but Oda's trying to show us this shouldn't be considered a negative. Usopp's reaction means everything here. His pride of his father is what we need to account for, and from Shanks leaving Luffy, to Luffy leaving his own village, to Zoro leaving his own village, to Luffy and Kobe parting ways. Once again, Oda is trying to hammer in the fact that these seas are what hold such connections. Parting ways doesn't mean parting hearts or parting love. And again, Usopp is the introduction of this core concept. Another part of Usopp's introduction to take note of is Usopp's lies, especially with what the children say of Usopp's lies. As he runs off to Kaya's house, the children explain he's probably gone off to tell lies, and Luffy says that's not very nice, but the kids explain it's actually very nice. The arc also opened with Usopp lying to his town, yelling that pirates are coming. So we can assume this lie has a nice meaning behind it too. But the main reason this line is important is because we're seeing a stereotypically bad quality be twisted into something good. Usopp's lies essentially are a morale booster for both Kaya, the town, and himself. While the lesson would usually be that lies are bad, Oda is turning us on our head with his own message here. But this isn't just Usopp specific. This idea is followed into the majority of the Straw Hats. It's in a similar way that Nami's thievery would usually be seen as bad, or Zoro's demon reputation would be seen as bad. But both of these characters have twisted such concepts to help people. We don't know this about Nami yet, of course, but Usopp's lies being bad is working as a tool to make us double think the actions and reputations of these characters. Overall, Nami, Usopp, and Zoro do not fit into the mold of being stereotypically good people because of the common belief of what their actions perpetuate. Syrup Village encourages us to see that this world is not black and white. We're not in a kindergarten class where we're learning good from bad. And the difference we've already seen in pirates as a whole is why Luffy fits into these themes too. Being a pirate is not very nice. Actually, it's very nice. You see where I'm coming from here? It's these small lines that build this world into what it is. Not only that, but Kuro, currently known as Klahadore here, I can't say his name, is the actual biggest liar on this island. Kuro established to us that Usopp is an outcast on their island due to his father being a pirate, and he kicks Usopp off Kaya's property after provoking him. Side note, Usopp jokingly calls Kuro a mole entering the estate at this point, and we can assume this is the beginning of Usopp's lies becoming truth. After Usopp discovers Kuro's plan to kill Kaya and plunder the village, he screams in fear that pirates are coming. Now, we know this is the truth, but Usopp's reputation has no one believing him. A villager even says something to him that caught my eye specifically. If you were serious and responsible like Mr. Klahadore, we'd believe you. Once again, Oda's showing that lies aren't inherently bad with Usopp, but he's also showing it depends on the intent of such lies through Usopp and Kuro both being liars. And at the same time, there's a commentary here on the normal of the world versus the freaks of the world, especially with how normal does not mean better nor safer. The most malicious lies hide beneath presentable surfaces, and because Kuro is presenting himself as being responsible and normal, he is removed from suspicion. Even though Usopp has a caring heart, he's seen as an unserious outcast. Therefore, his words are never taken to heart. And I know you can say, but Usopp built a reputation as a liar. But again, Kuro is also lying. He's lied about his name, his person, his personality as a whole. Kuro's reputation in this village isn't being a liar, it is a lie. Usopp is an authentic person in his unusualness, and just because he has a reputation of lying doesn't mean he shouldn't be taken seriously at all. Which then comes back to Usopp's lies becoming truth, and is a really, really good metaphor on how we are supposed to take Usopp's character as a whole. Just because he's comedic, and just because he's a physically weak, self-proclaimed coward, doesn't mean we shouldn't take him seriously. This setup is genius in my opinion. Syrup Village is Oda telling us even the comic relief isn't always the comic relief, hence why that title can jump between all characters at all times, and why a silly moment can also be serious. A good example of this is Zoro's moments being stuck behind the oil slope. This is a hilarious Zoro moment, and yet this is serious. We're allowed to laugh while still worrying about the outcome. Once we actually get to the fighting, it starts with only Usopp, followed by Nami joining soon after. Syrup Village is actually detrimental in establishing the duo of Nami and Usopp. Their bond solidified for two reasons. First of all, they are both not born fighters. Nami steals to avoid a physical fight, while Usopp lies. Luffy and Zoro are both hard hitters, but they needed to stay away from this fight at the beginning so we could see the capability of Nami and Usopp. Not only do we discover there's more than one way to fight in this world thanks to these two, but we see how compatible they are due to their fighting styles being inspired from the fact they're both not born fighters. This not only develops into future problems, it also develops into future techniques with original styles for non-devil fruit users or trained fighters. There's more than one way to win a battle, and Nami and Usopp are the models for such an idea. The second thing that connects Usopp and Nami is Usopp's love for his village. Usopp was prepared to die to make sure everyone was safe, to keep the pirates away from his island. And If that's not foreshadowing for Nami's own situation, I truly don't know what is. Usopp even yells that he loves his village, he wants nothing bad to befall it. And this is also a callback of the whole treasure theme, because it's quite obvious that Usopp's village is his treasure, in the same way Nami's is her own. Another setup from this fight is Zoro's avid protection of his crew. We hadn't really seen it yet, but as Usopp moves to help Zoro in his fight, Zoro stops Usopp from being able to interfere and yells, "Usopp, you idiot, are you trying to get yourself killed?" The reason for this is because, as Nami says, maybe he saved us. Zoro is currently growing from some guy who just joined Luffy at random to a character that is starting to exhibit genuine care for all members of his crew. It's similar to Zoro saving the little girl from the Marines, and now we know it wasn't a one-time thing just for a child, while also not being a protection reserved just for Luffy. Zoro's loyalty is not just to Luffy, but to the crew as a whole. His protection of Usopp and Nami are the seeds of this idea quickly blossoming to make Zoro something more. Actually, Syrup Village was important in telling us Zoro's not as stoic of a man nor swordsman as he presents himself to be. He gets lost easily, he jokes with kids, he loses his cool, he panics in a struggle, and he deeply cares to the point of avid protection. Although presented as the cool swordsman, once again, it's owed to telling us that outward appearances are not all that. This man, this demon, is actually a big softie, and his coolness feels to be a persona of some kind. Side note again, Zoro says he's crap at one sword style while fighting cat boys, something I find hilarious for a guy who's trying to be the world's greatest swordsman. Chasing Mihawk and you can't even use one sword efficiently? Jokes aside, I think this is meant to be a setup for when he takes on Mihawk and Mihawk uses one small dagger. Zoro's already starting to feel like a big fish in a small pond against these cats. Once Luffy arrives in the fight, we get one of my favorite scenes ever, which is Luffy scaring the shit out of Kuro's pirates just to run past them. This joke is what made me realize that One Piece is so much funnier than anyone that's on. Now, as Luffy actually gets involved in the fight, two major things happen. The first major thing is Usopp screaming that he's going to do all it takes to save his village, even if it means putting his life on the line. What does that line remind us of? If you didn't guess it, it's a callback to Luffy's own words to Nami during Romance Dawn. Luffy called Nami unprepared because she wasn't prepared to risk her own life once joining Buggy's crew as a pirate, because being prepared means risking your own life. Not only is Usopp's heart and bravery on show when protecting his village, but putting his life on the line is telling us that this man has the heart and soul of a pirate. Luffy's bond with Usopp was already formed through their connection with the red-haired pirates, but it has now been permanently set thanks to Usopp's ambitions being so strong. He will give his life for it, because that's what being a pirate is, according to Luffy. The second important thing that happens through the fight is Luffy's interactions with Kuro. As Kuro boasts about tricking Kaya and how much he actually hated her, we can see Luffy is seething in rage from such words. But it's not just the betrayal of Kaya that pisses Luffy off. It's also Kuro's betrayal of his own crew. He not only planned to abandon them, but kill them. Jumping back a bit, Buggy wasn't the perfect captain, but he didn't hate his crew at any point. Using them as shields was cowardly, and punishing them for any issues was unfair on his part. But he was still loyal to his crew, as his crew were loyal to him. Kuro, on the other hand, didn't give a shit about any of them. He saw his crew and the pirate life as something he could throw away. We are basically watching Luffy face someone who sees being a captain as 4D chess, with the crew being his pieces. Kuro uses loyalty as a tool for personal gain, but he doesn't give that loyalty back. And considering this is an arc where Zoro's own loyalty for his crew as a whole has been put on display, we can assume this this is the major takeaway of Kuro and Syrup Village: lies and loyalty. So Luffy facing Kuro is a tool to show us how seriously Luffy truly takes loyalty from his crew, and how he gives it right back as the captain. Hence why it starts to make more and more sense that Luffy forms strong bonds immediately upon adding someone as a crewmate. Thanks to this arc, when it comes to bonds and crew, we know Luffy doesn't around. There is one more thing Luffy says that is a major setup for nearly every future arc. The scene consists of Kuro asking why Luffy's even fighting for Syrup Village if he doesn't even live there. And Luffy says back, "Because there's someone I don't want you to kill." Simple as can be. Why does Luffy fight for islands and towns if he has no connection to them? Because there's someone Luffy doesn't want killed. That's about as straightforward of an answer you can possibly get. And yet that single line is at the core of nearly every arc to this day. The last thing to say about the fight with Kuro is we watch Oda's world expand through written connections thanks to Kuro and Morgan. How did Kuro escape piracy? By faking capture and execution. Who caught and executed his decoy? Captain Morgan. Already, Oda's indicating even the small importance of previously established characters, because I'm sure we can agree that many of us weren't expecting a callback to Morgan, or at least I sure wasn't. He could have made it any random insignificant marine that we'd never see again, yet chose to build on his world by explaining Morgan's status and Kuro's disappearance with one stone. It's these small details, even from the start, that already make you start to appreciate One Piece. With a bit more hammering in with the Freaks theme that was previously mentioned, as Kuro calls Pirate Society's cast-offs, Luffy finally punches his face. The fight ends with Luffy and Zoro saying Usopp saved the village, while the villagers never learn the truth of what really happened. The Merry is finally introduced as the Straw Hats' first official ship, a gift given from Kaya, and the arc wraps up with Usopp joining the Straw Hats. It closes out with a story from Usopp's childhood, as we're told the reason for Usopp's lies is because he was trying to give his sick mother some hope while she was on her deathbed. And there's that theme again. Hope. Syrup Village was Oda's spin on the tale of the boy who cried wolf. Most of us have guessed this, but I am personally a big fan of just how Oda's decided to portray it. Because if you know the tale, the boy who cried wolf ended in the boy dying due to his lies. So why choose that tale to portray a character like Usopp? Probably because the boy who cried wolf, while being a liar, still let the people of his village know there were no wolves. It's in the same sense Usopp crying out, "Pirates are coming," allowed Syrup Village to know it was actually another peaceful day. And Oda showed the optimistic end of these lies. Even as Usopp tries to tell Kaya the truth about Kuro, she tells Usopp that was a nasty thing to say. And we're shown the reality and truth of the situation can hurt more than a lie. Usopp wanted to stay the liar that he was because his lies, oddly enough, gave the village peace of mind. So instead of being consumed by the wolf, Usopp fought it off with his own hands, being sure to keep his villagers' morale and peace safe while continuing to let them know there are no wolves. Usopp being a captain of his own crew at the time also contrasted Kuro's captainhood, as Usopp loving his weak child crew showed more love and loyalty than Kuro ever did towards his own strong crew. Overall, this arc is a good one to display Oda's unconventional character traits. He's made being a liar a positive trait, but is still telling us it depends on intent. Because he's writing about pirates, he's very conscious about pirates still having a negative status in this world. And what better way to show the Straw Hats are pirates by still making them unruly with stereotypically bad traits. Because right now, Luffy's crew consists of the Demon of the East, a thief, and a liar. On paper, that sounds terrifying and cruel. Yet, thanks to Syrup Village telling us even the negatives can be used for positive influence, the Straw Hats are truly starting to shape into something special. With all that said, let's move on to one of my favorite arcs.
Anywhere you go, you belong.
お前さ
Anywhere you
オールブルーって知ってるか
say, anywhere.
Do I even need to say who's introduced in this arc? I need to calm myself down because this is not going to be a section about you-know-who. This is going to be a section about the Baratie and what it does, because Christ almighty, does it do a lot. I need to shake myself out so we can get into this one. The Baratie introduces Johnny, Yosoku, Don Craig, Gin, Zeph, Mihawk, and Sanji. Mihawk and Sanji. This is an absolute powerhouse of an arc, bringing two beautiful bad bitches into one room. In my opinion, the Baratie is when One Piece really started to pick up steam. While Romance Dawn and Syrup Village are good and important for establishing One Piece's roots, the Baratie truly feels like when everything is starting to culminate together. Of course, Arlong Park is the actual climax of it all, but we'll get to that when we get to that. My point is, we have the Merry, we have a more solid crew. The Baratie arc even opens up with the Straw Hats Jolly Roger being created, and Luffy is truly starting to feel like an actual pirate. Thanks to Zoro and Nami, we're told the one thing currently missing to officially make this a crew is a cook. Let it be known, Zoro even said a cook is essential to a long voyage. How funny those words are, considering who the cook turned out to be. In terms of writing problems, Oda is starting to evolve in real time. There are less exposition boxes, less holding hands with on-the-nose character speech, i.e. there's no, oh boy, I just love making fun of this kid moments that stood out to me, and I believe the Baratie to be the tip of the diamond, finally emerging from the rough here. I'm not saying it is the diamond, but it's the start of it, and I only say this because I went into the Baratie not expecting to like Sanji at all, nor care about him at all, and it got me more invested in One Piece. And with me being Sanji obsessed, as you probably know, surely this arc did something right to turn me into a fan. To start off with, as I previously said, the Baratie opens with the creation of Luffy's Jolly Roger. Usopp is then also quickly established as the crew sniper, given a role beyond just a liar. Johnny and Yosoku are then also introduced, and these two are important because they're here to tell us Zoro had a life before being a pirate. As someone who got a reputation as a pirate hunter, of course he'll have friends and connections from his hunting days, while also showing us the difference between him and pirate hunters who actually brand themselves as such. As we know, Zoro never accepted the title of pirate hunter, nor called himself that, so it's good to know there is an actual choice of profession with pirate hunting. Johnny and Yosaku's existence also make Zoro a more well-rounded character. While we had Zoro's past with Kuina shown to us, there's still years between Kuina's death and meeting Luffy. Zoro having friends or connections between that time is Oda telling us there's never really any dead years here, or years we're just not meant to think about. Life still exists around and outside of Luffy, so thanks to Johnny and Yosaku, we are encouraged to think more about the past of the Straw Hats, and that's something that truly develops well, because the Baratie is the introduction of Sanji, and if anyone has one hell of a past, it's him. This may have been an accident on Oda's part, I'm not denying that, because Johnny and Yosoku were also used as plot devices to bring the Straw Hats to the Baratie and then bring them to Arlong Park. They were characters used as seamless connections between arcs, but they still existed with a strong bond and relationship to Zoro. And that's the One Piece difference. Even characters there as plot devices still hold character and are still integrated into the story with relationships of some kind. Basically, I like Johnny and Yosoku. It makes me very happy to know Zoro did indeed have friends before Luffy and he wasn't just some lonely bum. Anyways, a point of interest here comes in the form of scurvy. Nami saves Johnny with her knowledge of nutrition, and we're shown why a cook is so important to a crew. Except this isn't just Baratie specific, because food was a continuous theme before we even made it to this arc. Luffy's food obsession and love for eating is literally what led him to accidentally eating the gum fruit. Zoro was introduced with a deal to starve. Choo Choo's only item saved from the pet store was a bag of dog food. Nami announces to Luffy she loves tangerines. And Usopp becomes friendly with the Straw Hats over a meal. Romance Dawn had even ended with Nami refusing to share her food and telling Luffy he was an idiot for underestimating the sea. While the beginning of Syrup Village had Luffy yelling for meat. Even before we meet Sanji, food is an important aspect to the story, because it's an important aspect to Luffy and the world at large. From the get-go, it's hammered in how dire starvation is, how the seas are merciless to those without food, how Luffy loves food, and how essential a sea cook truly is. This is probably why, with the Baratie finally coming into play, Oda is adamant that a sea cook is not just a cook. A sea cook holds your life in their hands while taking on the ocean, One Piece's waters previously conveyed to be dangerous ones. And the Baratie is probably the best place possible for the fighting of dreams. After all, the Baratie is Zeph's floating dream, the man only surviving starvation due to his will and ambition to open up this restaurant. So seeing Zoro survive Mihawk's sword only makes sense outside of the restaurant of floating ambition. Are we seeing how everything connects up and how Oda is already being specific on what happens where? But I'm getting ahead of myself because I haven't even mentioned Sanji's introduction. Just remember that Oda has set up the importance of a cook and food before this, hence why Sanji's introduction feels very highly anticipated. Sanji's introduction and Zeph's introduction are somewhat similar, both of them violent and loud. In fact, the Baratie takes off at a rocketing pace, and the fighting of cooks, customers, and pirates back and forth is hectic. It's moving fast, there's a lot more action, and I can only assume this is Oda trying to replicate the crazy atmosphere of working at a restaurant. Although I find it hilarious he's equating being a line cook to that of a pirate ship. But I'm sure any line cook will tell you that it is, in fact, this chaotic. The Marines are brought back into the story with full body, and just like Captain Morgan, he seems to be an asshole. So far, the Marines have not been given a good reputation outside of Kobe. I wonder what Oda's trying to say with that. Important to note, the Marines also specified that they didn't feed a starving Gin once capturing him. So while Gin was already hungry, they continued to starve him for 3 more days. This is now the second time the Marines have starved a character, and considering Gin is presented as a demonic, heartless pirate, we can surely see Oda and One Piece believe purposefully starving a person is an unbelievable cruelty. Something I realized while writing this is Zoro and Gin are both believed to be demons by others. Zoro is introduced to us as a bloodthirsty demon, while Gin is called the Demon Man. They were also both first introduced through starvation thanks to the Marines, and what does this mean? Does this mean anything? I don't know, but it feels like a blinding parallel of some kind to me. Maybe it's just that not even demons deserve to starve. The difference is Gin was merciless in his ways. We know this from Gin's own words. Him being such a wicked person is important, but I see it as a continuous display that One Piece believes starving to be one of the most barbaric ways to go. So what does that say about the Marines who willingly starve people? Well, you can decide that one. Now let's actually get to the feeding of Gin. I know a lot of you are on the edge of your seats for Mihawk, but I need to get a bit more Sanji stuff out of the way first. I promise it's important. Remember when we previously discussed in Syrup Village that Oda turns negative traits on their head? That he believes good can come from lying, and that's what Usopp is meant to represent. Well, Sanji also adds a bit of a twist to this, because he's meant to be kind. It's not that Oda is taking a positive trait and making it a negative. He's simply saying even positive traits will not always be seen so stereotypically on the surface. That even something as positive as kindness can be portrayed in unconventional, weird ways while still being kind. Because Sanji, to the outside eye, is not kind. He's violent, he's hot-headed, and he's overall a menace. There are even 2 panels upon his introduction of the other chefs begging Sanji not to beat the shit out of Full Body. Where is the kindness and the so-called golden heart that Sanji is supposed to have? It's simple. It's because Oda's saying kindness is not always easy, and kindness comes in many forms. In my opinion, kindness a lot of the time tends to be taught and mistaken as being a pushover. Kindness is saying sorry when someone bumps into you even though they don't say it back, or giving into the demands of someone else due to pressure. This doesn't necessarily mean you are a pushover, by the way. In some forms, this can be kindness. But do you think Sanji would do these things? I feel Oda is challenging the belief of it's easy to be kind with Sanji. Yes, it's easy to be kind if the kindness is just picking up someone's pencil, but can you still be kind in the face of peril to an enemy who you have nothing to gain from? Because there's a difference between being forgiving and being kind. And the fact Sanji feeds Gin just to fight him later on is an example of this. He's not forgiving towards Gin because he still fights to kill him, but his kindness is what led him to fighting Gin anyway. Had Sanji not fed Gin, he wouldn't have had the strength to fight. But does Sanji regret his choices? No. Because even though Gin is the demon man, Sanji still made the choice to feed him. And he knew what that choice could entail. And that is how Oda presents kindness. It's rough, it's tough, and it's golden. Being kind is not easy. It doesn't always come naturally. It doesn't always lead to the best outcomes. But it is a choice. And that's what makes a person kind, even from the most aggressive of people. From Usopp's lies being a positive morale booster, to Sanji's kindness having consequences and still choosing to be kind, well, I have to say it, it's just peak cinema. We see more of Luffy's selection process of his crew through Sanji. We can now more than confirm it doesn't come down to ability of the crewmates, but through Luffy's personal fondness of person. And then we get this amazing line.
やだ断る
何がだ
お前が断ることを俺は断る
I refuse your refusal. In the manga, it's I decline your declination, but the first one flows so much better. Considering Luffy's so adamant on having Sanji on his crew, it's no wonder why he didn't let Nami leave him either. Luffy's stubbornness for Sanji feels like a prelude for his behavior towards Nami during Arlong Park. And of course, this stubbornness went back to Zoro's recruitment as well. Anyways, more of Sanji's own stubbornness comes through with Zeph, his kindness kindness shines as he feeds Don Craig, and the Don Craig fleet shows up to take over the Baratie. Once we get through all these motions, a key player in the game shows up, and he's the one I know everyone's excited to get to. Mihawk. Mihawk's introduction was incredible. I've already done a video on why Mihawk's introduction is as good as it is, but I'll slightly recap it here. Upon Mihawk's introduction, we don't know he's a warlord of the sea yet. All we know him as is a pirate and the greatest swordsman in the world. It's very fortunate Zoro ran into him here because Mihawk probably didn't even know the Baratie existed. Johnny and Yosaku nearly sent Zoro on a wild goose chase with some misinformation of a rumor they'd misheard. But it's not fate that had Mihawk show up, although I guess you could call it that. Mihawk only makes it to the Baratie because he was quite literally hunting Don Craig's fleet. And when asked why he was doing it, his answer is spectacular. For fun. 8. And left no crumbs. What better way to show the absolute might of a character than by having them chase one of the most powerful fleets in the East for fun? Mihawk's hunt for Don Craig here is not just important for his character, indicating that Mihawk is bored with where he is and can lead to further discussions in the future, but it's important for One Piece's world at large. Because as Mihawk talks to Zoro, he discusses the 4 seas: the North, the East, the South, and the West. Mihawk explains in his experience the East is the tamest of the seas. Don Craig, of course, comes from the East, and we know he only lasted 2 seconds in the Grand Line thanks to Mihawk. So what Mihawk's appearance is showing here, and what he's for, although for multiple reasons, is to give a taste, an example, and a threat of what truly lies not just on the Grand Line, but in One Piece's world. Because if the East is the tamest of the seas, and someone like Don Craig was hunted for fun like a rabbit, what and who else is out there? Mihawk is truly the first idea we get of the might of One Piece's ocean as a whole. Mihawk calling the East the tamest sea is also a good setup for Zoro being feared from home, but needing a long way to go for growing his strength in the world. At first, Luffy recruiting Zoro felt like he'd gotten someone insanely powerful on his team, but thanks to Mihawk, we now know that Zoro is a rabbit. And Mihawk isn't the type of fool who hunts rabbits with a cannon. Yikes. Mihawk even straight up says he'll teach Zoro how big the world is, and this famous fight is essentially telling us that Zoro's not all that. While he's feared in the East and while he is strong, Zoro's essentially been residing in the level 1 dungeon all his life. From Zoro's perspective, that has got to be a major bummer, because it's not like he really knew, but we didn't know either, and Mihawk's just such a good building of world context and indication of Zoro's strength. There's also an idea from this fight and from Zoro's past that Zoro only picked 3 swords because he thought it'd make him stronger, i.e. the bigger the gun, the more guns I have, the better I will be. Totally ironic considering Kuina kept beating him with 1 sword. I would honestly say Zoro's 3-sword style came from having a complex of strength or from a childish idea of strength, hence why his struggle using 1 sword against Kuro's pirates seemed like a build-up to the eventual Mihawk fight. Because as Mihawk stops Zoro with a dagger the size of a cheese knife, and as he even tells Zoro his swordsmanship is heavy-handed, Zoro finally gets the memo that his idea of strength seems superficial at best. Mihawk's final twist in Zoro's gut, aside from the actual twist in his gut, is when he says, "What drives you? Why do you fight so hard when you cannot win? you're a weakling. Zoro refuses to retreat after such words, even telling Mihawk he'd rather die than suffer defeat. And Mihawk finally sees that spark of strength in Zoro. Zoro's surface strength is boorish, heavy-handed, and childish, but the strength he holds in his heart, the strength that drives his ambitions, his will, and his dreams, is what Mihawk finally managed to bring out. This is why Mihawk doesn't kill Zoro, and also why he leaves him with a keepsake, the keepsake being that giant scar across his chest. Now Zoro has an idea of what strength actually is, what it actually means to be strong, and Mihawk leaving Zoro alive feels like the older generation pushing the younger generation to reach their true potential. Because when it comes to the elders motivating the youth to create a new era with their own dreams, the Baratie is about that as well. Mihawk is not only showing us the world, but tying into the themes of the Baratie. Due to his defeat, Zoro musters up the strength to say one last thing, and that's his pledge to never lose again. This is also the first time Zoro acknowledges Luffy as the King of Pirates, or anyone acknowledges Luffy as the King of Pirates. And a new dream is made here, with both of their dreams entangling together. The reason this is such a big moment, and the reason this must be said, goes back to Luffy and Zoro's first meeting. Zoro originally felt like he'd been blackmailed to join Luffy, but due to Zoro's word being important to him, he joined Luffy's side. To a point, this didn't feel like a creation of crewmates, but a business exchange. Feeling even more so when Zoro tells him if Luffy gets in the way of him becoming a master swordsman, he will kill Luffy. Zoro and Luffy's dreams, their ambitions at that point in time, were separate. He didn't deeply care about Luffy becoming king, so long as Luffy just didn't stop him from his own dreams. But now, with the inclusion of Mihawk, with his defeat, with this vow, they're no longer existing on the same ship with separate dreams. Zoro's dream is there to push Luffy's. Luffy's dream is there to push Zoro's. And they physically can no longer get in the way of each other. This whole speech and scene is essentially Oda telling us that Zoro's original threat to Luffy is gone. That Luffy can't get in the way at all anymore, because their dreams are entangled, because it follows into every other Straw Hat. While all the Straw Hats have their own dreams, Oda is making a point that they don't get in the way of these dreams, and the Straw Hats as a whole share a collective dream. They all want Luffy to be Pirate King. Luffy wants all of them to achieve their own dreams. They all want each other's dreams to come true, and none of them will put themselves above the crew as a collective. Zoro's speech here, his promise, is the beginning of the Straw Hats as a family, and that's definitely why Mihawk says they make a good team. One last thing to add before we move on from the Mihawk fight is, this fight is the beginning of Sanji's inclusion of the Straw Hats and their dreams, as he gets tangled up in everything too. When Zoro gets struck down by Mihawk, nearly dying on the spot, Sanji can't believe what he's seeing. So, through a literal cold sweat, Sanji yells, "It's easy. Abandon your stupid dream." And I'll tell you what, it's no coincidence that we get a panel of Sanji listening to Zoro's new promise. Sanji not only hears of Zoro wanting to be a master swordsman, but of Luffy wanting to be the Pirate King. And he's watching these two combine their dreams. For Sanji, a character who was saved because he shared a dream with Zeph, who gave up his own dream to help Zeph with a new one, reason, it's no wonder why Sanji needed to be included here. Of course, we don't know these things about Sanji at this point, but his outburst and shock towards both Zoro and Luffy is indication enough that this deeply moved him for a reason. The reason being, Sanji thought his dream was so ridiculous and such a fairy tale that no one would want to share it with him outside of Zeph, that no one would indulge him in it or believe in him to pursue it. And yet, he's watching these two crazy idiots give everything for their own crazy dreams together. Mihawk was not just there for Zoro, or just there for world building, or just there for his own introduction, but he was also there so we could see how impossible Zoro's dream was, and so Sanji could see how impossible Zoro's dream was, just to see him still not give up on it. It's a feedback loop of these three having such impossible dreams, and the seeds of their connection and bond has been planted right here. Sanji seeing Zoro's fight was the beginning of Zoro and Sanji's respect for each other, while Sanji seeing Luffy fight was beginning of their respect for each other. The Baratie is a big lore dump arc in terms of who it brings in, but it's still Sanji's introduction and recruitment arc, so there's a reason Sanji is here for all of this. Otherwise, you could have Mihawk show up butt nowhere at any time and do all this. But Oda's chosen Sanji's recruitment arc to involve Mihawk for a reason. Everything in One Piece, where it happens and who it happens to, happens for a reason. The Baratie is what made me start to realize this. Now, let's actually move on from this part as Mihawk's leaving begins the final act of this mini arc. The act being the fight between the Baratie and the Don Craig pirates. Nami stolen the Merry at this time. Johnny, Yosaku, Zoro, and Usopp go after her, so now Luffy and Sanji are stuck together to have all the bonding moments you can possibly imagine. This fight is where Don Craig establishes that Devil Fruit users are rare on the East but are swarming the Grand Line, so when we get to the Grand Line and Oda can introduce all the Devil Fruit users he wants, we have an explanation for that. Through this fight, Oda hammers in again and again and again that sea cooks are more than just cooks. He's extremely determined about us knowing that, and I assume it's so we don't go, but Sanji is just a cook. Why should he be as strong as he is? Because he's not just a cook, he's a sea cook, and the sea is the mightiest force in One Piece's world. Sanji is physically strong because he has to be to survive on these waters, as all sea cooks must be. So when we jump chapters ahead and Sanji's beating the shit out of government official agents, we are supposed to admire the strength and grit of the sea cook. Calling him just a cook is, thanks to the Baratie, blatantly incorrect. Hint hint, this is a setup for why Sanji's in the monster trio and why he can stand back to back with someone who's trained in martial arts all their life, because the Baratie may as well have been his own damn dojo. I think a fun little addition in the Don Craig fight, and something that's already got the wings of the Pirate King taking root, is when Sanji says a chef's knife is his soul. Sanji, are you saying a knife? A small blade is someone's soul? Now let's go back to Zoro's introduction, where he eats every last grain of rice off the ground and wants the little girl to know it was delicious. It's one thing to eat for survival, it's another thing that he wants her to know he appreciates it. A blade being someone's soul, and the refusal of wasting food while appreciating it. Sounds like something the other one would say, don't you think? These two are the wings of the Pirate King, officially. Already we are seeing these characters have been made to parallel each other. This is indication that, somehow, Zoro and Sanji are two sides of the same coin, even from the get-go. It's these small things that build dynamic and relationship. Oda is very masterful at it. But Feel free to say I'm reaching, whatever. Go watch my Zoro and Sanji video if you want to know more about them. Through the fight, Gin throws Zeph to the ground and puts a gun to his head. He tells Sanji to leave, for all the cooks to abandon the Baratie, and no one will get hurt. But Sanji refuses. He says he can't possibly leave the Baratie, and Gin tells Sanji, it's easy, just leave the ship and you'll all be spared. Wait a minute. Sanji, it's easy to leave the ship, Gin says. It's easy to abandon Zeph's dream, is what Gin's saying. Now wait a minute. That almost sounds like something you said, Sanji. Something you said to a certain swordsman, perhaps? The point I'm getting at here is we're already seeing Sanji's bullshitting in action. Sanji never says what he means when he's being rude. Usually when he's an asshole, it's not because he's actually an asshole. There's just a lot of problems going on inside of him. So we're seeing that Sanji didn't actually believe what he shouted at Zoro. There's just a lot of turmoil locked up in this little blonde brat. This whole Sanji and Gin exchange, I think, is meant to mirror Zoro and Mihawk's moment, where Zoro refused to turn his back and would rather face death. Sanji is doing the exact same thing, and it's for someone else's dreams that he promised to help with, the same way beating Mihawk was also mostly for Kuina and Zoro's promise to her. We know this because Zoro had literal Kuina flashbacks while fighting Mihawk. Now, as Sanji yells he can't turn his back on the Baratie, he's hit with his own Zeph flashback. It's a mirror, guys. Zoro fighting Mihawk is a mirror to Sanji fighting Don Craig. It's all here for a reason. Sanji's backstory is big sad. It chokes me up and I genuinely find it hard to get through. Even just rereading the Baratie for this video had me in tears, mainly because I just do not like the image of a 10-year-old child starving. Who knew? Quick summary of the backstory. Sanji exists as the only child on a sailing ship where he's first learning to be a cook. Zeph, a pirate, invades the ship and Sanji tries to fight him off. Sanji falls into the water, Zeph saves him, sacrificing and eating his own leg to do so, and after starving for over 2 months, Zeph announces his new dream is to open a floating restaurant for any stranded person on the ocean. Sadness aside, there are 3 things to take from Sanji's backstory that are relevant to the arc and One Piece as a whole. The first one is the sharing and inheriting of dreams. At first, it seems weird Zeph saved Sanji just for his dream. Sanji being a random little kid he didn't even know. But we discover the All Blue is not just a wild dream, but a laughable one. This is established with little Sanji being made fun of by older cooks, and is further established as Zeph's whole crew laugh at Sanji for announcing his dream of the All Blue. Considering we've just seen Zoro give his own life for a dream that was nearly impossible before this, and Luffy's announced to have his own impossible dream, we can now see why watching these two duke it out for their crazy dreams gets Sanji worked up. Everyone laughing at the All Blue is also a good enough reason for Zeph wanting to save Sanji, because sharing a dream with someone is everything in this world. Sharing a dream is what pushes one to pursue it. Knowing there's someone out there who believes in both you and your dream gives motivation like nothing else. This is what Shanks did with Luffy by giving Luffy the hat. This is what Koshiro did with Zoro by giving Zoro Kuina's sword. And this is also what Zeph has done with Sanji by saving his life. Similarly, giving up a limb for Sanji the same way Shanks did for Luffy. The question to come out of Sanji's dream is, why is he so intent on the All Blue? Why does he refuse to back down from the fact that the All Blue exists? Is it just because he's a sea cook who wants a fantasy to be true? That, my friends, is called a setup. Especially considering we've seen the story for where every other Straw Hat's dreams came from. Sanji being obsessed obsessed with the all blue at this point is a total anomaly. And don't we get an amazing payoff years down the line? Second thing to take from this backstory is the ocean. Zeph has a whole monologue about how the ocean is vast and brutal, that it takes lives away from sailors as they die cursing it. The panels of Sanji looking out at the vast sea especially feel ominous. The ocean is alive in this story. We've been told previously that the ocean hates those with the power of the devil fruit, that it should never be underestimated. And this backstory is the final nail in the coffin to establish the ocean as its own living, ominous force. This is metaphorical, by the way. I'm not saying Oda's creating some plot twist where the ocean is a person or something. I'm saying the ocean in One Piece's story may as well be its own character. It's vast, it's deadly, it's unforgiving, and it's brutal. We gain respect and fear for the ocean like nothing else from Sanji's backstory. And that's why sea cooks are clarified to be more than just cooks, because they're fighting this merciless force of nature every day. Last thing to look at is the idea of what freedom and treasure means to each individual person. What do I mean by this? Well, when Sanji cuts open Zeph's bag, tons of gold and jewels fall out. Sanji is shocked that it's not food, while Zeph says, a fortune in gold and nothing to eat. Funny, huh? What's so important about this? Because Nami's arc is directly after this one. And what does Nami prioritize in terms of gaining her own freedom and life? Money and gold. Sanji and Nami's stories directly contrast each other, with wealth being useless to Sanji, yet freedom to Nami. Oda isn't trying to say Nami's dreams are shallow, or that Sanji wouldn't respect her idea of freedom. This is supposed to be an understanding of what liberation means to each person. And at the end of the day, they bleed into each other. You need money to buy food, and you need to eat to make money. Without one, it can be hard to get the other. And there's also something there about Sanji being trapped on a rock without food with tons of gold, while Nami's life was threatened by Arlong on a tangerine farm with no gold in sight. Overall, this line about treasure feels it's here to contrast Nami's own fixation with it, of what's important to who and why they believe it to be important. After Sanji's backstory, we get an understanding of what sacrifice really is and what it means in One Piece. Sanji screams that he can't let the Baratie go under due to owing Zeph for saving his life, and Luffy seems upset about this. The reason being, Luffy doesn't seem to see this as a necessary sacrifice. Back in Romance Dawn, Luffy had confirmed that being a pirate means putting your life on the line every day. Being a pirate means sacrifice of self. Choo Choo the dog had also been putting himself on the line for the pet store that he saw as his treasure, something Luffy respected at the time. Even during the Baratie, Zoro told Sanji he was throwing his life away for his dream, but that was his choice. This is Zoro committing a sacrifice of self. So, with Sanji sacrificing himself for the Baratie, why did this piss Luffy off so bad? Shouldn't Luffy respect Sanji's choice the way he did Choo Choo's, or even the way he did Usopp's before this? Well, because Sanji's sacrifice isn't really a choice, it's a sacrifice driven by guilt. A guilt Luffy knows Sanji shouldn't hold when Luffy had experienced the same thing with Shanks. Luffy isn't becoming the Pirate King to make up for what happened to Shanks. His dreams of piracy were there even before Shanks. Luffy is living to be the Pirate King to meet Shanks on equal terms, but also because he knew Shanks saved him, so Luffy could live out his own dreams without dying. The short version is Shanks saved Luffy so Luffy could freely live his life, and that's exactly what Luffy did. Zeph saved Sanji so he could do the same thing, chase his dreams, a dream they both shared even. And yet, Sanji chained himself to the Baratie purely out of guilt. It's no wonder why this pissed Luffy off, because Zeph is watching the boy he saved throw his life away for him, even though Zeph just wanted Sanji to live out his own dreams. Sacrifice is a big topic and a big theme in One Piece, so this explanation of what makes sacrifice, why one sacrifices themselves, and what's considered a noble sacrifice is pretty damn important. And to add a squeeze of lime into the cut, Luffy could probably tell that Zeph's treasure wasn't the Baratie itself, but Sanji. I believe this to be pretty well confirmed after Zeph punched Sanji with his bare hands. The hands we know are not used for fighting or hitting anyone. If you're getting confused, we've established dreams and we've established treasures. These are two different things. Zeph's new dream was the Baratie, but his treasure was Sanji. One Piece is clarifying that to accomplish your dreams and to find ambition for these dreams, you need a treasure you want to protect. It just adds more fuel to the willful fire. After this whole debacle, Sanji's kindness is solidly set through Gin's emotional outburst, and we see both the outcome and power of Sanji's kindness. Not only is this an incredible scene, but it's an important reoccurring detail of Sanji's character that affects future arcs. Listen, it's not my fault there's a whole arc far off in the future about Sanji's kindness. There's an entire arc where the whole point is just that. I'm just taking note for what's going to be happening in future arcs. Continuing on with the fight, Luffy, similar to how he was with Kuro, becomes frustrated with Don Craig's way of captaining. We've now gotten two pirate captains Luffy has faced who he's been openly enraged by. Shockingly enough, Buggy's captain policies weren't the thing that pissed Luffy off. Despite using some of his crew as shields, Buggy still loved his crew. He wasn't on the level of Kuro and Don Craig is what I'm saying. In the same way Kuro was an asshole, Don Craig is an asshole. So Luffy refuses to lose to him. It's at this point we get some of the most important lines in the series. And these lines come from Zeph. Even a man bristling with powerful weapons can be skewered by the spear of blind grit. There's no give in him. In the end, it's not about weapons. Grit counts more than steel. These are important lines because this is an understanding of how Luffy faces all of his enemies, and how he wins seemingly impossible fights. Luffy could face a literal god, which he kind of does, but due to zero hesitance existing within his Gumu Gumu body, Luffy's perseverance means he just keeps fighting. And this grit is what's made him capable of taking down 40-year-old war criminals. It's not that Oda's made a loophole for himself, because Luffy still needs to achieve victory amongst some circumstances. But he's made it so when Luffy wins against an insane enemy, we can remember what Zeph said and go, ah, that's right. This guy's just insane. Once Don Craig is down, the conclusion of the fight comes with one last line from Gin that honestly perfectly wraps everything together. Gin says, "Somehow Don Craig's dreams have become my dreams." He continues on to say that when you really commit yourself, you don't worry about the enemy or even about your own life. Now, think about the dream part, and think about every goddamn thing I've said during this Baratie segment. Zoro holding on to Kuina, Zoro committing his dream to Luffy, Luffy committing his own dream back, Zeph saving Sanji due to a shared dream, Sanji helping Zeph with a new dream, Sanji holding off on his actual dream, Sanji watching these two idiots chase an impossible dream, and Sanji finally sharing his dream with Luffy. Somehow, their dreams have become his dreams and vice versa. The Baratie is the arc where everyone's dreams finally entangle into one big thing. Zoro and Luffy's dreams tie together once Zoro loses to Mihawk, and Sanji's dream then ties in right with theirs as he finds fellow idiots to fuel his ambition. Generally, this is what this arc's about. It's about many things, but Sanji finally coughing up the All Blue is the confession Luffy was looking for. This is the satisfying conclusion to the arc because getting the All Blue out of Sanji was like tugging his damn teeth out. As I said previously, I think the Baratie is a masterful arc, and Oda's combination of everything, from Zeph to Gin to Don Craig to Mihawk to Sanji, gives a promise of what's to come in One Piece. It's not just promise story-wise, but character-wise, as he's showing his ability of tying in themes for all characters to create a bigger picture. Mihawk especially was an amazing addition to the Baratie as a tool to tie the monster trio's dreams together, while also existing to expand the scope of the One Piece world both power-wise and world-building-wise. That's simply an insane way to introduce a character like Mihawk, and right alongside Sanji, no less. But holy shit, I've said enough about the Baratie, so let's wrap it up. Zeph attempts to kick Sanji out, Sanji realizes what he's doing and willingly leaves instead. And we're met with the gorgeous scene of Sanji sobbing his gratitude and goodbyes to Zeph. So, as Luffy sails off with a sea cook in hand, we can finally move on to the arc that truly solidifies One Piece as the sensation that it is. Arlong Park. What's in Arlong Park? Warlord talk? Arlong, fishmen as a whole, and the people of Nami's village. You'll notice not too many characters are introduced this arc, or at least characters that join the main cast. This is because Arlong Park is the climax of the East Blue, Logue Town being the conclusion and ending, and it's a bit silly to introduce a whole new main character at the climax. Arlong Park is only as good as it is due to everything we've seen before it. It has been built up and carefully crafted for us to be excited about. Nami's story being the peak of the East Blue is just an incredibly big bonus, but her joinings and origins were indicated to be a mystery from the start. Arlong Park opens with Sanji being called a precious sea cook by the narrator. I just thought that was funny. It's here we discover Johnny and Yosaku aren't just here to be Zoro's friends, but to introduce us to Arlong and the Warlord system. Due to them dropping a bunch of flyers, Nami saw them and was immediately reminded of her deal with Arlong. It was through this cruel reminder that she could no longer stay with the Straw Hats, and is probably why she took the Merry when she did. Nami didn't just randomly up and leave during the Baratie. If anything, it seems she would have enjoyed sailing further with Luffy and crew. Arlong's poster was just a snap back to reality for her, and again, we see Oda's movement of plot and actions of characters all come from somewhere. As they sail towards Arlong Park, Yosaku explains who Arlong is, which naturally leads into the topic of Jinbe, which naturally leads into Warlords, which naturally leads into the discovery that Mihawk is a warlord. With Yosaku being a pirate hunter, it's no wonder why he knows all of this. Of course, a man who is actually a self-labeled pirate hunter would have done his research on who he should and shouldn't mess with. Zoro should count himself lucky he ran into these two, or it's possible he would have run into Arlong himself. The Jinbe mention is obviously important, the warlord mention just as much. This is now a further building of this world. Suddenly the East feels incredibly small and incredibly tame. Again, if the East is tame and we're about to meet Arlong, what the hell else lies out there? There's also a Fisherman Island mention, and fishermen as a whole are introduced as a race. Upon first read through, I genuinely did not think much of fishermen outside of this is just a super strong fictional race of characters Oda has introduced to create a scary, intimidating villain. oh boy, was I wrong about that. In hindsight, I should have thought more about it, especially since Arlong keeps mentioning how much he hates humans. But not just humans, human males specifically. Why does Arlong have a particular vendetta against human males? Well, maybe it's just that he hates human females a little less, and possibly has a soft spot for human girls. I'm saying this very well might be a hint for Arlong's connection to Koala in the future, because he didn't particularly like her, but he didn't fully hate her either. Of course, soft spot is still imprisoning and beating Nami for 80 years, but Arlong is just a violent, cruel, and angry man. Once we see Nami again, she's beating up a kid due to him wanting to kill Arlong. After she hits him, she then gives him money and tells him to leave. This is the first ever instance we see of Nami giving someone money or treasure of any kind, something we never saw her willingly do all the way up to now. It's a tiny thing like this that makes us question her situation with Arlong, and also question her relationship with children. She clearly has a soft spot for children to give a little boy money, a characteristic made blindingly obvious in the future. This little boy then connects us to Nojiko. Again, a good flow from character to character in Oda's writing here. And Nojiko says something that connects to one of the overall themes we've witnessed from Romance Dawn to the Baratie. So when I see a kid like this who's too cowardly to live, it makes me sick. This line is brilliant because not only does it add to everything we've already seen, but it's a foreshadowing of the village's situation as a whole. We have no idea why Nojiko is saying this, nor why she's so passionate about it, but it's sure as hell something Luffy would agree with. Of course, we discover where Nojiko's idea of existing takes endurance and strength comes from, and it's just absolutely heartbreaking. The village is something I will get to later. For now, let's go through the motions of the arc. Usopp has also been carefully chosen to be the one to first talk to Nojiko, because he not only mentions how happy Nami is around the Straw Hats to her, but how Nami helped save his village. See, when I mentioned Nami's connection to Usopp through his love for Syrup Village, that wasn't me bullshitting. That aspect has now been carried over to Nami's own arc. Once we get more of a look at the village, Arlong talks about the town having to pay tribute or being killed. He specifically uses the word tribute. This almost sounds like what a particular power in the world of One Piece does, doesn't it? The power in question being introduced in the same arc that Arlong Park and Fishman are brought back around. It's Baratie and the Celestial Dragons. Oda is just so good at the fine details. You truly cannot deny the brilliance in which he builds this world, because it's crazy to think that a few lines and a character from the very start will keep being built upon and hold relevance years later. But let's stay in Arlong Park. The implied leader of the village, Genzo, openly says that surviving is their form of fighting back. It's a bit of an odd thing to say when Arlong's dominance would be completely worthless if he killed all these villagers. His money and influence coming from controlling the people, so there must be more going on here. The Baratie has indeed shown us that existing is fighting. Luffy believes staying alive is the best way to repay someone who's sacrificed something for you, and the Baratie itself foreshadowed what's happening in Arlong Park. Once again, Arlong Park is only as good as it is because it's a culmination of everything before it. Now, as Arlong and his crew are being devious and dastardly to the village, we meet someone interesting, Hachi. After Zoro's cut down multiple fishmen, Hachi is who he comes across. At this point, our view of fishmen is that they're terrifying. They can swim at rapid speeds. They have 10 times the strength of humans. They can flip houses. So Zoro's Hachi encounter can only be trouble. Until it isn't. Hachi even calls himself a cuddly octopus fishman. He speaks to Zoro normally, treats him kindly, and even escorts Zoro across the island to help him find his crew. Yes, Hachi did this because he thought Zoro was Arlong's guest, but there's no mention of any human-fishman divide here. Hachi is clearly just a regular guy, and Arlong's views on humans begin to be questioned through Hachi's existence. Is it that Hachi's just a weirdo and Arlong's the fishman majority? Or are Arlong and his crew the weirdos here? Is Arlong just an asshole and Hachi's been swept up in the wrong crowd? Zoro even says Hachi's a strange one as Hachi waves him goodbye. But how can Zoro not think this to be the case when Arlong and his crew are the first fishmen Zoro's ever met? In hindsight, these questions are a lot more prominent, but it's all here to establish fishmen as a race nonetheless. Hachi is very important to the inclusion of fishmen. Hachi creates questions, setups, and payoffs for the future. Now, if you haven't noticed, Luffy has not been around at all for any of this. This arc opened with Usopp, Zoro, Nami, and Nojiko. Usopp's gotten a lot of information of the island while Zoro's gotten all the information he needs about Nami, regarding her betrayal and her character. In fact, Zoro's interaction with Nami is why he understands Luffy's insistence on keeping Nami as their navigator. Luffy's trust and reading of characters is not something Zoro can replicate. Yet Luffy's trust in Nami has now developed into Zoro's trust in Nami. Zoro risked it by throwing himself in the water, and Luffy was proven right when Nami saved him. This is a combination of Zoro's loyalty growing and Zoro's own connection with Nami always being authentic. Oda's trying to say that Nami's time with them during Romance Dawn was definitely real, and now both we and Zoro know this. But back to the Luffy thing. I think the beginning of Arlong Park is brilliant because it shows the story can move without Luffy. The world is still in motion when Luffy's not there. Luffy is our protagonist, but all the other characters can still be characters without him. It's a fantastic way to show just how large and lived in this world is, and also sets up for future arcs or scenarios where Luffy doesn't have to be there for the story to still be relevant. It's also a great way of showing the Straw Hats' depth in allowing them to exist both on their own and at Luffy's side. The Straw Hats are not Straw Hats just because of Luffy. He's who found them, but he's not their end-all be-all reason for being a crew. Essentially, the Straw Hats just like each other, and Luffy's not their singular social link. I'm sure I don't have to say that this is a very important thing to display, but it's a very important thing to display. As Luffy does come back into the story, we finally get Nami's backstory and reasoning for everything, which Luffy elects to ignore. Makes perfect sense when he hasn't heard the backstories of any of his crew. If they don't want to tell their past, Luffy doesn't need to hear it. There's a whole character reason for this, but Luffy not needing to hear anyone relive their trauma is consistent to Luffy. If you want more on why he did this and him as a character, you can watch my Luffy videos. But just like Shanks with Luffy or Zeph with Sanji, Nami has a similar story about a mentor figure sacrificing something for her, except instead of a limb, it was her life. LMAO was Nami's mother, although not by blood. I'm surprised I haven't said it yet, but family being family even without the blood connection is also a big theme here. It's Oda telling us that positive connections are forged through actions of love. In One Piece's world, being blood family does not automatically mean you have a bond as strong as steel. In a world of pirates, of outcasts finding and fighting for each other, I'd say this is a very important concept to solidify. Nami's own dreams came from Bellemere, who encouraged her passion of cartography, while Bellemere's life and world centered around her two daughters. Nami is told that Bellemere was ready to die after being left for dead on the battlefield between Marines and pirates, but was inspired and motivated to stay alive after finding a young Nojiko and Nami, especially upon seeing Nami's smile. And oh my god, this is almost like how Zeph pushed himself to stay alive due to sharing a dream with Sanji. All these things connect, as I keep saying. Bellemere's death was an absolutely heart-wrenching thing to read, but what were we supposed to take from it? Well, apart from tears and sadness, Bellemere's death encapsulates the themes of hope, sacrifice for the new generation, and protecting what's important to you, also known as one's treasure. Bellemere found hope through Nami and Nojiko, because even on a war-torn battlefield, Nami could still smile. This hope was so strong it led to Bellemere leaving the Marines to raise these two kids, her poverty a struggle she was happy to face for them. Due to Nami and Nojiko keeping herself alive, she was happy to die for them too. Bellemere couldn't reject the two that made her life worth living, hence her defiance against Arlong and her pride in announcing Nami and Nojiko as her daughters, and she died with a smile on her face. There's no regret from Bellemere here. She'd rather die with her love than live with her guilt, and this was her final stand in showing Nami and Nojiko that blood does not define their relationship. She died as their mother, her final words being, "I love you," and we can very easily come to the conclusion that Bellemere's treasure was her daughters. You must be prepared to both live and die for your treasure, to defend it and sacrifice yourself for it, because the treasure you hold is what motivates you to keep going, and is what allows you to die with a smile on your face. From Luffy and Shanks, to Zoro and Kuina, to Usopp and Syrup Village, to Zeph and Sanji. Nami's backstory hits because we have seen sacrifice of love in motion again and again throughout the East Blue, finally coming to an intense finale with Bellemere, this woman the first to die for her love, all while smiling down the barrel of a gun. I understand characters like Kuina and Usopp's mother had died before this, but those were different circumstances. Kuina's life was not a chosen sacrifice, it was an accident. Zoro's own life was the chosen sacrifice for Kuina. Similar thing can be said about Usopp's mother. Her death was unfortunate and an accident. Bellemere truly showed us what it takes to love someone, to hold onto your hope, to hold onto the treasure that is your family in One Piece's world. It takes being prepared to give your life. It takes sacrifice. And Nami, in a tragic way, carried over this lesson to her own life. She sacrificed herself for her village, never wanting anyone to be hurt or killed again, which is why she gets so frustrated at the Straw Hats following her and trying to help her, because, for the love of God, can't they see she doesn't want anyone hurt or killed again for her sake? And this is why her village exists as it does. If they can't die for her, then they will live for her, accepting her sacrifice and fighting with her the only way they can. If a little girl has chosen to be their savior, then in this situation, death would be the coward's way out. It takes strength to sacrifice, but it also takes strength to exist. When someone has given their life for you, you must be strong and live. And isn't that just such a powerful message for this series to have? Don't die for your saviors, but live for your saviors. This is one of my favorite themes One Piece has and embodies and continues to convey throughout nearly every single arc. Moving on from that, there's a line from Arlong about Bellemere dying for her foolish love, and that's quite literally what all the Straw Hats are doing. For the love of their crew, their family, and their dreams, they are happy to die for their foolish love. They can smile every day because of their foolish love, and they have their ambitions because of their foolish love. This goes back to what the Baratie was about, back to the Zoro and Mihawk fight, back to the Don Craig fight, and even back to Usopp and Syrup Village as he protected his island. Everything is done due to foolish love. Oda may as well be beating us over the head with it at this point. Becoming the Pirate King, becoming a Master Swordsman, drawing a map of the world, being a brave warrior of the sea, and finding the All Blue. It's all foolish, but it's all done for love. Arlong Park is exploding this point, this theme in our faces. This is what One Piece is about. Nami's flashback ends with Bellemere telling her she must not curse the age she was born into, that she must never lose the ability to laugh. And I'm sure these two things are ringing bells when it comes to exploring future themes in this series. When we get to Luffy's legendary scene of putting his hat on Nami's head, of yelling, "Of course he'll help her," the build-up of every other arc before this is why this scene slaps so hard. Luffy doesn't need some sob story. He doesn't need a noble reason to help Nami. He doesn't need her origin or an explanation. He is just helping her because he wants to. He's freeing the island because there are people on the island he doesn't want killed. And Luffy's prepared to give his life to protect his treasure, his crew. The hat on Nami's head not only symbolizes that Luffy's trusting Nami with his own treasure, but that Nami is also his treasure because she's his navigator. She's his family and crew. Every member of Luffy's crew is his treasure. It's probably why they're called the Straw Hats when the physical Straw Hat itself is his treasure. And this fact is made more and more blindingly obvious the further we get through One Piece. Once we finally get to the fight, the final climax of Arlong Park, it's both exciting and a relief because it's been long awaited and long expected. We knew Luffy would eventually fight Arlong. It was just teased and dangled in front of our faces until Luffy was finally given permission to fight Arlong. I think it's very sweet and very heartwarming that this permission came in the form of Nami asking for help. Through the fight, something important is established, or I should say, starting to be established, and that's the dynamic of Zoro and Sanji. Overall, Oda is actually very, very good at who he puts with who and when he does it. From what I can recall, he hasn't paired anyone up more than once at this point just so he can show us the dynamics of these characters together for the first time. So with Sanji being new to the crew, it only makes sense that Luffy is quite literally forcibly removed from the battlefield, Usopp running away from the battlefield, to leave Zoro and Sanji to fight side by side. This is the first arc that begins to develop the wings of the Pirate King, as not only do both Zoro and Sanji fight with Luffy in mind, they also fight with the other in mind, and are going up against Arlong's own right and left hand men. While the fighting pattern within One Piece deviates through arcs, majority of the time a major fight has this exact formula, and Arlong Park is where it stemmed from. Through the fight, Hachi's friendliness persists, which is still important, but a very funny and honestly on-the-nose thing Oda does is make Hachi take out 6 swords. Had Zoro not fought Mihawk before this may have scared him, but Mihawk has taught him better. Strength does not mean numbers, especially not the number of swords, because Mihawk practically beat him with a butter knife. Zoro's fight here, and the number of swords Hachi has, is a display of Zoro's mental and physical evolution of what strength means to him now. He's already moving past his previous childish idea of what power meant, and even though he still keeps his 3-sword style, Hachi's 6-sword style just seems ridiculous to both us and Zoro. I say this is on the nose, but I honestly only realized this once actually writing this script. So screw you, Oda. I hate that you're good at your job. Zoro's wound from Mihawk is even mentioned again at this time, meaning we are obviously supposed to be thinking about the Mihawk fight in comparison to this. Sanji himself notices Zoro's sick state due to his injury, and Sanji, for some reason, is shocked Zoro's wounds have not healed yet. I personally find this really funny, considering it probably hasn't even been a week since Zoro's been cut in half. Like, Sanji, I'm sorry we're not all super soldiers, give the man some slack, oh my god. Usopp also gets more development as we see even though he's a coward, he won't turn his back when it matters. He'll lie when he has to, but he doesn't want to lie about giving up a fight. And we get a pretty important line from him here. This line being, Luffy and those guys live every day like there's no tomorrow. That's why they can laugh so heartily. And that's the core of being a pirate in One Piece. Or at least that's Luffy's core of being a pirate. It's an important line. I don't have much to say about Sanji here because Sanji got all of his very important and big moments during the Baratie. It makes sense that Oda didn't slap us with more hardcore Sanji moments when we've just witnessed a ton of them. The only really important addition of Sanji's fight is his will to save people, and his reasoning for fighting for Nami is the same as Luffy's, i.e. he's not just helping Nami because she's a pretty girl. He's now part of this crew and he will fight for his crew. We get this revelation when Kurobi is talking down to Sanji, and it's clear Sanji very deeply cares about the Straw Hats because Kurobi's taunting makes Sanji lock the in. Once Usopp, Sanji, and Zoro have beaten their big bads, the final boss left is Arlong. Nami comes back into the story at this point, as does Luffy, because Nami needs to be here to witness Arlong's defeat. However, before Luffy does come back, Zoro, for some reason, gives Nami a thumbs down. With the context of this scene, and what's happening, I still don't know what the hell this means. I assume this is just Zoro being cheeky and telling her, girl, I'll be real, I'm f***ed right now, but maybe I'm missing something, I don't know. Also, fun little possible foreshadowing moment, Zoro tells Sanji, 30 seconds, I won't last more than that. And Sanji responds with, that's plenty. Feels similar to their famous Long Ring Longland scene, but who knows? I just thought that was a fun tidbit. When Luffy comes back into the fight, he has one of the best entrances ever, which is being flung up into the air to then just throw Zoro behind him. Say what you want about One Piece, but Oda sure knows how to get you hyped up and leave you flabbergasted at the same time. Luffy's character shines when Arlong tries to pick a verbal fight with Luffy. Arlong wanting to yap about his fishman superiority again, just for Luffy to not take the bait because he isn't thinking about Arlong being a fisherman at all. King who doesn't see species, I guess. Jokes aside, this is actually important to Luffy's character, because it's telling us Luffy doesn't look up at or down on anyone for who or what they were born as. This is an aspect that defines Luffy and comes around multiple times in One Piece. Arlong continues to try and make fun of Luffy, but Luffy has a speech that, once again, defines what this series is about and what Luffy is about. Luffy yells, I don't know how to use a sword. I don't know how to navigate either. I can't cook and I can't tell lies. I know I can't live without help from a lot of people. And as Arlong calls Luffy's confession a helplessness, Luffy continues on to say, but I can beat you. Once again, think back to the previous arcs. Romance Dawn, Syrup Village, and Baratie were all about this. It was about Luffy helping others because they helped him. And Oda's forming the Straw Hats through this mentality. Luffy is not a do-it-all protagonist. He's not a lone wolf, and he's not the most intelligent person. Luffy has things he's good at and things he's bad at, but he's not ashamed of relying on people for help. After all, he's only alive due to the help of Shanks, and it's why Luffy's inability to swim has never upset him, nor did eating a devil fruit ever demotivate him from chasing his dreams. Because to accomplish your dreams, you need the help of other people. You need other people to believe in you just as much as you believe in them. And it's why Nami doesn't need to do anything through this fight. She's done enough. She's lived her struggles. And she's now with a captain who will do what she can't, which is beat Arlong, because that's what Luffy can do. To continue on from this, Luffy crashes into Nami's old room, full of her maps that she was forced to draw, and seeing the bloodied pen sends Luffy into a fit of rage. He destroys the room, he destroys the maps, and there's a message here of what chasing your dreams actually means. Nami was drawing maps with Arlong. She was doing the thing she loves the most, but it wasn't authentic. Arlong was forcing Nami to use her talents against her own will. He was using Nami for his own gain, and Luffy is livid at the abuse of her talents and dreams. Luffy needs a navigator, but he would never force anyone to work for him through blackmail or otherwise. He'd been blackmailed, and this entire scene, this entire arc, is displaying that Luffy's crew is a pure labor of love. Once again, Luffy is not picking people for their talents. He's not choosing anyone who's the most fit for the job. He's simply bringing together a family, a treasure that he wants to love and protect. Hence why when Luffy yells at Nami that they're shipmates, that she's one of them now, Nami cries, because this is someone who actually loves her, who actually cares for her, and will allow her to chase her dreams the way she wants. Arlong Park is the creation of the Straw Hats. It's what cements the Straw Hats. From love to dreams to treasures to hope, to living every day like it's your last. This is who the Straw Hats are. Nami hated pirates the most out of the original East Blue crew. She didn't understand what pirates were or what being a pirate meant. She only knew pirates as bloodthirsty, selfish criminals. So when she meets Luffy in Orange Town, when she sees Zoro on his crew, when she helps Usopp save his village, and when Luffy comes back to get her with a selfless cook right behind him, all of these people fighting just to help her, Nami finally understands what being a pirate means. She understands what being a Straw Hat means, and so do we. This arc ends with Nami's joy and acceptance in being a pirate, and Oda has done a fantastic job in wrapping up the recruitment stories of each Straw Hat at this point in time, while telling us exactly what a pirate is in this world. Not only that, but as Nami leaves her island by stealing everyone's wallets, we're told that this is still Nami. She's still devious, she's still devilish, and she's still a thief. Arlong never made her that. She was never really forced to be that. She just likes stealing. And now she can steal to her heart's content as a Straw Hat. Arlong Park is the peak of the East Blue because it solidified One Piece as something special, as something that prides itself on its themes of dreams, on its holding onto of hope, and on its foolish ideas of love. And it does all of this while still promising us that there's so much more beyond the horizon. The cherry on top is when Arlong Park comes to a close with one final message, and that message is the power of a smile. Oda's cheesy as hell, but goddamn if he doesn't make you cry. Now I say we get into the final chapter of the East Blue.
Wari? Ore? Shinda?
Logue Town is a very short arc, but important to conclude the East and move us onto bigger, better things. This mini arc establishes the news crew, Shanks and Mihawk's relationships, Roger's beginnings, Tashigi, Dragon, and Smirker. We also get Luffy's first bounty poster, indicating there's truly no going back for Luffy. He is now an official pirate. Let it be known that as Luffy's first poster was being printed, the Marines declared him to be evil. The Marine who said this was Nezumi, but it sure is interesting just why Luffy got his first poster. Save a whole island from terrible pirates and suddenly you're the bad guy, I guess. I say this, but I did forget to mention Bellemere and the previous Marines trying to save Nami's island. So at this point we know Marines aren't all corrupt assholes, and Logue Town only enforces that idea, because in this arc we meet Tashigi and Smoker. Smoker originally being called a monster by a sword shop owner, while Tashigi defends that Smoker isn't a monster at all. Considering what we'd previously seen of the Marines, this is hard to believe, and Oda definitely knew this and was definitely writing with bastard Marines in mind, so he introduces Smoker in the sweetest way anyone could introduce a character ever. He makes a little girl run into him and gives the little girl money to replace the ice cream that she dropped on his pants. What a nice guy, truly a man for the people. Tashigi's introduction also includes her being heckled and made fun of just to show her swordsmanship, and Zoro being freaked out about Tashigi looking like Kuina is arguably very funny to me, only because he says, I guess female swordsmen do exist. He just forgot women existed as a whole. No way, you're a female who likes swords? You're a female who likes anime? Dude, you're a female who likes video games? Those exist! But the thing to take from Tashigi's introduction is Zoro thought he was weak upon encountering her, probably because he let past emotions dictate him. Zoro's own ideas of weakness and strength is a very big thing about him. Zoro considering his reaction to Tashigi a weakness is something to take into account for the future. And then of course it doesn't help that he says he cannot stand her existence simply for looking and speaking like Kuina, but she got his ass back for that one, so I'm sure they worked it out. The start of Logue Town also has Shanks being a stinking drunk, while Mihawk shows him Luffy's new bounty poster. There's not really much to say here, apart from Shanks has an established past with Mihawk. We don't really know what it is, outside of they were previously rivals on the sea, and Shanks' reaction to the poster tells us he's clearly keeping tabs on Luffy like a proud dad. But Shanks and Mihawk's appearance is a good way to set the world stage before the Straw Hats enter the Grand Line. This is not a theory video, but I also have a theory that the reason the Straw Hats keep running into trouble after this arc is because Zoro quite literally gets the super up cursed sword that will kill you and wants to hurt you. But I guess we can't blame everything on Katetsu. Who knows, maybe it's not Zoro that's super lucky here, but Luffy, since this arc has a prominent focus on one's own luck and destiny in relation to their dreams. What I'm saying is Luffy's luck counters Katetsu's curse. I can't say Zoro is a particularly lucky guy when he ran into Helmeppo and Captain Morgan, or maybe he is lucky for encountering Luffy. I don't know. I don't know how luck and fate works, but Logue Town is really trying to make us think about all this. I also wrote in my notes that this arc established that Zoro's insane, and I kind of stand by that when he threw a sword in the air to possibly chop his own arm off. This feels like a self-made sword trap to me. I don't know. The majority of this arc, although small, is just the Straw Hats collecting supplies for their voyage. Zoro gets his swords, Sanji gets some groceries, Usopp gets his ammo, Nami gets some clothes, and Luffy is literally just a tourist. He's standing at Roger's execution platform as if it's the Eiffel Tower or something. And then he climbs it, which is awesome, but this sets up Luffy being caught by Alvida and our favorite clown, Buggy. Buggy. That's right, Buggy returns in this arc as his cover story wrapped up back in Arlong Park. This will be one of many Buggy returns and shows that connections made in One Piece's world can indeed keep coming back. Even if they're not particularly good connections, they are still connections nonetheless. Essentially, Oda is telling us to not forget about any characters, something I believe is very important considering how big One Piece's world becomes. Before Luffy gets caught by Buggy, he announces his dream of being the Pirate King on Roger's platform. And when Buggy does get Luffy, he's about to chop Luffy's head off. I wonder what this could all mean. Is this a parallel to Roger? Is Luffy embodying the new generation of pirates? Is this a hint that Luffy will become the next Pirate King? Could Luffy possibly be pushing a new age? Who can tell? I just don't think it's obvious enough. I'm kidding. I love this part, but it is a little bit on the nose. Look, I say this as a joke, but it's because I have hindsight. Now it's obvious that Luffy's pushing a new age, although accidentally, but the talk of a new generation, a new age, and the molding of the future wasn't as clear yet. The only hints we got of this was Roger's own death at the start, creating the age of pirates, and Bellemere telling Nami and Nojiko to not curse the age they were born into. The future of the world and the changing of ages is, I'd say, starting to be developed in Logue Town. The will of the D is also starting to develop as Luffy smiles before his execution. Smoker is in shock because he recalls Roger doing the exact same thing. And remember, at this point, we didn't even think about the D in Luffy's name. In fact, we didn't even know Roger was a D yet. So this is all foreshadowing for those holding the will of the D. Zoro and Sanji's dynamic as the wings and as parallels of each other also get more of a build-up as they're the only two to run forward and try to help Luffy. We get literal back-to-back panels of them saying the near exact same thing. Sanji thinks, if I can just kick down the platform, while Zoro thinks, if I can just chop down the platform. These two will work side by side in the future, but for now they're still fighting individually. This page to me feels very obvious that Oda's trying to tell us they'd work well together if they just worked together. Their wings dynamic didn't come out of nowhere. This moment is a continuation and evolution from Arlong Park. When Luffy gets saved by a strike of lightning, not even this comes out of nowhere, because Nami kept mentioning how weird the weather was beforehand. And as Luffy's saved by said lightning, Zoro and Sanji share a funny exchange. Sanji asks Zoro, "Do you believe in a higher power?" While Zoro responds, "Don't talk nonsense." All while Luffy is standing there, happy and healthy. As funny as I find this exchange to be, even this holds very important relevance to future themes and arcs. After all, when Luffy stands back up, alive, he smiles, "Lucky me." And the topic of faith, fate, and luck all coincides in this scene when Smoker says, Luffy accepted his fate and laughed. Also, Sanji is talking about a higher power, about believing in a higher power, with Luffy right there. So Sanji is asking Zoro, "Do you believe in a god?" And Zoro saying, "Shut up," all with Luffy there. Luffy, the man who ate the gum-gum fruit. The gum-gum fruit, which turns into something more. I don't know how much Oda planned, no one really knows, but this panel has aged exceptionally well. In chapter 100, Dragon is introduced, a man we know nothing about at this point, and he appears just to save Luffy. But, more importantly, this chapter is titled The Legend Begins, which is a strange title considering this is chapter 100. But this must mean the legend of who Luffy is and what he becomes begins, because the chapter before this opened with the words, "Legends that endure in the future were events that took place in the past." And then the very first page of chapter 100 is a whole page quoting Roger. These things cannot be stopped. An inherited strength of will, one's dreams, the ebb and flow of the ages. As long as people hunger for freedom, these things will exist. I don't know about you, but this is hyping me up beyond belief, because now that Luffy has his crew, Logue Town is truly the beginning of the legend of Luffy and the Straw Hats. We're being promised a tale like no other here, and Oda's doing a very good job at both concluding the East Blue and beginning the actual adventures of the Grand Line. Very fitting, since Logue Town is quite literally the town of the beginning and the end. Roger's words are also the very core of One Piece: an inherited will, one's dreams, the changing of ages, and the hunger for freedom. One Piece will now forever embody these words from here on out, much more than it was doing before. And why is Roger the one who's being quoted? Because he started this age. He started a world of piracy, and he's pushed for the era of freedom and dreams. We must never forget Roger is the root cause for why and how Luffy even became a pirate. Roger's will moving through himself to Shanks to Luffy, all represented by the Straw Hat. We didn't know Shanks was even part of Roger's crew here though. We didn't even know that Straw Hat was originally Roger's. But with everything I'm saying here, we can see just how Oda made the Straw Hat more and more significant over time. Luffy and co leave Logue Town with a ton of enemies behind them. Smoker and Buggy both prepared to chase Luffy to the Grand Line, and at mention of the Grand Line, Buggy says, "How nostalgic," suggesting that Buggy has been to the Grand Line before. This clown will always come back. Oda was threatening us with Buggy from the start. To put an end to both Logue Town and the East as a whole, the Straw Hats make a promise over a barrel. This is done outside the Red Line because they're quite literally leaving their home waters. And the legend begins on the Grand Line. It would be a bit silly to make this promise before Logue Town, because Logue Town as an arc is symbolizing the end of the East, and the start of the Straw Hats' dreams coming true as a whole. There is no coming back from the Grand Line. Their dreams will be found on those seas. So breaking the barrel is the beginning of the end, and the end of the beginning. One Piece's world will be changed from here on out. Everything will be different. And breaking this barrel is a permanent goodbye to the East, as well as the final forming of the Straw Hats and their combined dreams. The Grand Line was the end goal of the East. This is a major transition, and Roger's words beforehand only intensifies just how big of a moment this really is. The barrel has been broken, the Grand Line is ahead, and a new age has begun. Logue Town is short but sweet, small but significant, and truly works as a fantastic farewell to the East. We've been assured of the return of multiple characters, while promised the introduction of many more. This world is about to expand beyond our imaginations. And even in the stormiest of seas, Luffy and his crew keep their big, goofy grins, letting us know whatever comes next, whatever's waiting for them out there, they'll be okay, so long as they have their dreams, their will, and each other. Final stretch, everyone. Let's finish this off so I can fall over and die. The East Blue is an amazing first arc, or saga, whatever you want to call it, but it gives us both an incredible opening and keeps enough hidden to tantalize us into following Luffy into the Grand Line. The East Blue is the ultimate carrot on a stick, and you can bet I'm running after it. Something the East Blue aimed to do was give us a grander view of piracy, from the bastard pirates to the fun pirates, and it did just that. If you didn't notice, every single arc had Luffy facing off against other pirate captains, and that's because we needed to see what Luffy didn't agree with in terms of being a captain. He didn't agree with sitting around and pillaging villages for the hell of it. He didn't agree with seeing your crew as pawns to be discarded. He didn't agree with a big crew meaning a strong crew, nor forcing your crew to do what you demand. And he especially didn't agree with using your crew's talents and dreams for your own selfish gain. Through the East Blue, Luffy's ideals of what being a captain means starts to form, and it's by what he thinks a captain shouldn't be. From Buggy to Kuro to Don Craig to Arlong, we are shown what it means to follow and be a captain. At the same time, the East Blue also tells us that the Marines aren't exactly the saviors of the people either, and it's very apparent that the world of One Piece is in total shambles. The main character focus here, I'd say, is Luffy, because the East demonstrates how Luffy recruits, but also how he inspires. Luffy's insane will and his endless grit has him beating down pirates with high bounties in the East, and that should seem ridiculous considering Luffy just set off on his journey. He didn't even have a ship when beating Buggy and Kuro, two pretty well-known pirates at the time. Yet, thanks to the Baratie, we know exactly why Luffy wins the fights he does, and thanks to Syrup Village, we know where his motivation comes from. Luffy beating Arlong was the final testament to Luffy's will, and Luffy, as a character, is making us believe in him too. Luffy made every single person he came across hopeful. He instilled hope in Zoro, Usopp, Sanji, and Nami, and in the people of all the islands he saved. And since the Grand Line is apparently a merciless place, a hopeless place, as we were told by Gin, Luffy's hope is already turning into the strongest weapon he could possibly have. Because something else the East Blue taught us is if you have hope, you can keep going. So long as there's hope, there's the desire for dreams and the will to accomplish them. Hope means you will never give up, and for Luffy's character, this is an idea that will blossom beautifully decades later. And again, this idea of hope stemmed from Gaimon. Gaimon! I just won't be able to get over that, I'm afraid. Overall, world stuff and plot stuff aside, the East Blue is the formation of the Straw Hats. This crew has been formed through trust and loyalty, through combined hopes and dreams, and that's the very core of the Straw Hats. Again, this is why they all announce their goals and dreams over the barrel outside of the Grand Line, because one crewmate's dream is everyone's dream. The Straw Hats are not a band of individuals at odds with each other, only working together to get what they want per person. They are a crew who fight for each other, give their lives for each other, and who dream for each other. They are Nakama, a family full of love and hope. And to achieve their dreams, the East displays the amount of sacrifice you need for such a goal. You throw your life on the line, your person, your entire being, to reach near impossible heights. Even if you're beaten down, just as Zoro was against Mihawk, your captain and your crew is why you can stand back up. The East isn't just about what you must sacrifice, but what motivates you. And for the Straw Hats, this motivation is your friends, your crew, and your family. The East Blue also establishes what sacrifice really is, when sacrifice is necessary, and when it's actually sacrifice. And it's deemed that sacrifice out of guilt or repayment is unnecessary, that whoever you're repaying will be pained, and being driven by guilt shouldn't be why you give your life. But sacrifice for what you love, for your own treasure, is meaningful. This treasure can be a straw hat, a pet store, a sword, a village, a ship, a restaurant, a person, or a dream. For all the Straw Hats as a crew, it's clear one of the major treasures is each other, the family they've found on these harsh seas. So they will sacrifice themselves for what they love, for who they love, because that's what it takes to be strong. And that's what it takes to be a pirate. You must be prepared to risk your own life. It's a continuous circle Oda has set up here. One exists for their dreams. Their dreams are pushed by their loved ones. Their will is formed through love of their dreams and their treasure. Their crewmates become their treasure, and so they all exist for each other as they share a collective dream. This is the root ideology of the Straw Hats. The East also sets up the major theme of inheriting wills. This arc not only starts with Luffy inheriting Shanks's will, but ends with Luffy seemingly inheriting Roger's will. Again, this comes back to sharing and pushing dreams. There's also a beautiful message from the East that I really like, which is, leaving your loved ones to pursue your dreams doesn't mean you love them any less. This is cemented in from Shanks and Luffy, to Yasopp and Usopp, to Zeph and Sanji, and even to Bellemere and Nami. While Bellemere isn't alive, Nami still states Bellemere wouldn't have approved of her becoming a pirate, but she'll be a pirate anyways. And this is fine, because so long as Nami's happy, Bellemere wouldn't love her any less, and Nami won't love Bellemere any less just for living a life opposite to hers. There is a selfishness in pursuing your dreams, but it's not a bad selfishness. You can still love your family while chasing your goals halfway across the world. In saying that, that's why the ocean is such an important part of One Piece, because there is a written connection of person to ocean in One Piece's world. This sea, while harsh and while holding merciless fears unlike anyone could imagine, also holds timeless bonds and love. The Straw Hats all met through the sea. Even Zoro only stumbled across Luffy due to him heading out to find Mihawk. And this ocean holds the same symbolism as everyone living under one sky. We are all connected by the ocean, whether we travel across it or not. So even the most dangerous areas are ones we can love. This is why Luffy's joy for the ocean is boundless, because the sea may want to swallow him up, but it will always deliver him to those he loves. And this is the East Blue. In a writing sense, there are some problems. Oda was still getting the hang of writing between islands. His exposition boxes were heavy-handed at times, but he very quickly evolved as a writer through this arc alone. Dialogue became less on the nose, the story reached a very seamless flow, and his connecting of themes and plot all came together fantastically by the climax and conclusion of the East. Something I will say is Oda's character and comedy was amazing right out the gate. And even though he somewhat stumbled with Zoro's first lines, Zoro, along with the other characters, knew exactly who they were and what they were about by the time the crew formed as a whole. Nami, especially, was a shining example of Oda's fantastic character writing, and I truly think he only gets better from here on out. The East, as I said, promised us a fantasy epic unlike anything else. This is just a taste of what's to come, a taste of adventure, of hope, of dreams, of a newly found family coming together purely out of love. The East Blue is the root of all of One Piece. Everything in the East is what One Piece is and what it becomes. And I'd say it's a fantastic beginning to the legend of Luffy and the Straw Hats. And with that, thanks for watching. Oh, hi everyone. Hi everyone. Hi. I don't think I can ever do this again because the script alone took me over a week to write, and I was gonna say I look a bit frazzled, but I look pretty good right now. From everything I had to write and create here, this was unreal. So yeah, an experience. This is all me. I'm the sole creator on this channel. I write, I edit, I record, I do everything because this is a labor of love. I love One Piece so much, and I know I said I'd never make anything like this again. That was a lie. I'm a liar. I will 100% be making more of these. I will be making more in-depth arc videos, and your support means absolutely everything to me to help me keep making what I love. What I'm trying to say here is, yes, this was a pain in the ass, but I loved every last second of it, and I hope this opened your mind to the East Blue. If there was anything in this video that blew your mind, please let me know, or if there was anything about the East that you liked and you thought I missed, let me know that too. Just a quick reminder that I do have a Patreon, and if you would like to support me there, I'd really appreciate it. However, I know not everyone can support me in that way, and just watching and sharing these videos does so much more than you can imagine for me. But tips are also nice, I will not lie. Tips actually help me a lot, so if you want to leave any kind of tip for this behemoth of a video, I will be kissing you directly on the mouth. My Patreon also includes how to get into my Discord if you would like to join my little community. Also, extra shout out to my patrons here because this video took me a long time to make and you guys supported me through all that time. My patrons are why I can pay my bills and why my lights stay on, so I really do appreciate the support you guys give me to help me keep creating the content that I can make. If there's anything you would like to see me cover, One Piece or otherwise, please let me know, and I'll see you in whatever I make next. See ya!